What would you think if I told you that a man can know, with complete clarity, that she's not right for him, and yet still be unable to walk away? That even when her love cuts him, even when the relationship corrodes his peace, he clings, not out of passion, not even out of hope, but out of something deeper, older, hidden. A force that moves beneath the surface of awareness, pulling him back again and again, not to the woman, but to the unresolved part of himself she awakens. He doesn't understand it. His friends don't understand it. Perhaps you have witnessed it, or lived it. A man bound to a woman who breaks him slowly, one wound at a time, yet he returns like a moth to flame. Why? The answer does not lie in logic, nor in love, but in the unconscious. This is not merely emotional attachment. It is shadow entanglement. Carl Jung wrote that we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And so it is with the man who cannot let go of the wrong woman. She is not simply a partner. She is a mirror, reflecting every repressed wound, every unhealed story, every forgotten fracture in his soul. She is the carrier of his shadow. And what is the shadow? It is the self he has denied, the emotional vulnerability buried beneath the armor, the childhood pain masked by stoic silence, the hunger for intimacy masked by conquest. In her presence, these shadows do not hide. They erupt. That's why he can't leave, because she awakens not only desire, but confrontation. She triggers the psychic emergency of becoming. To the world, she may look like chaos. She may seem manipulative, erratic, emotionally unavailable, or suffocating, and often she is. But to him, she is strangely sacred, not because she is good for him, but because she is necessary for the stage of psychological development he is trapped in. She forces him into contact with the very parts of himself he has spent his whole life avoiding. Her love burns because it is not love, it is projection. The anima, the unconscious feminine in every man, is not integrated within him. So it projects outward onto her. And she, willingly or not, becomes its vessel. She becomes the goddess and the demon, the muse and the tormentor. He is not loving her, but the image of his own unlived soul that she carries like fire in her hands. It is a dangerous illusion, and yet it is also a rite of passage, because only through the pain of false love can the soul awaken to the truth of what real love requires. Wholeness. And wholeness begins with integration. Until a man looks at the woman and sees her as she is, without illusion, and still chooses, or walks away, he remains her prisoner, shackled by the parts of himself he refuses to meet alone. You may wonder, what kind of woman gets entangled in this? Sometimes, she is a mirror too. She is not innocent. She may carry her own unmet
Two unconscious psyches colliding will always create intensity, but rarely peace. She may crave control, attention, or affirmation. She may not know why she stays either. In many cases, both are lost in a storm of mirrored abandonment, both replaying old wounds through each other. This is why passion becomes poison, because what they're feeding on is not love, but trauma familiarity. The nervous system confuses chaos with chemistry, intensity with intimacy. What hurts also feels like home. And so they return to each other, not because it's right, but because it's known. And what is known, even if destructive, feels safer than the terrifying unknown of true healing. From the outside, this looks like madness, but from a psychological lens, it is initiation. Not every wound is an end. Some are thresholds. When a man cannot let go of the wrong woman, it is often because he has not yet found the courage to let go of the version of himself that needs her. The version built on ego, on avoidance, on emptiness disguised as control. He needs her, not for life, but for awakening. She is the invitation to go within, to stop chasing the anima outside himself, and turn inward. To ask, what inside me keeps choosing pain? What part of me believes I am only worthy of love that hurts? Until that question is faced, he will stay, bound, confused, addicted. But the moment he sees her clearly, not as goddess, not as villain, but as human, the spell begins to break. And in that breaking, the real journey begins. The return to self, the union of opposites, the slow but sacred task of becoming whole. There is a moment, quiet, disorienting, often devastating, when the veil begins to lift. The man who once clung with white-knuckled desperation to the wrong woman begins to see. Her power fades, not because she has changed, but because the projection begins to dissolve. The goddess becomes a girl. The enchantress becomes a mirror. And the spell, the one cast not by her, but by his own unconscious mind, begins to crack. This is not a moment of triumph. It is a reckoning. What kept him bound wasn't her beauty or even her cruelty. It was the architecture of his inner world, his need to suffer, to feel significant, his belief that love must hurt to be real, his addiction to earning affection through endurance. These patterns, buried in the shadow, ruled his heart long before she arrived. She merely activated them. She was the storm that made his foundation shake, revealing the fractures that had always been there. He may try to blame her, to call her toxic, manipulative, cold. But blame is a defense, a shield against the unbearable truth that he chose her, again and again, even as she shattered him. Why? Because she matched the image of love he internalized in childhood. Perhaps he had to chase an emotionally distant mother. Perhaps he had to perform for attention, to twist himself into shapes that pleased others while abandoning himself. These old wounds become internal scripts, and the wrong woman, unknowingly, fits the role perfectly. She triggers the performance, the chase, the despair, not because she's evil, but because she is familiar. Her presence confirms the lie he learned early in life. You must suffer to be loved. You must shrink to be chosen. You must prove you are worthy. Carl Jung understood this well. Until the unconscious is made conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. The man may believe he keeps falling for the wrong woman, but he is not falling. He is repeating a wound disguised as desire, repeating a trauma dressed in attraction. And until he meets the shadow face to face, he will call this repetition love. The woman he cannot let go of is not his enemy. She is his lesson. She is the archetypal temptress, not in a moral sense, but in a mythic one. She represents the part of life that pulls him off his path and down into chaos, not to destroy him, but to initiate him, to humble him, to break open the fortress of ego and let something real emerge from the ruins. But this initiation has a cost. It requires death, not of the body but of identity. The man must let the old self die, the self that believed love was conditional, the self that saw women as From the outside, it looks like suffering, and yes, it is. But beneath the suffering is a metamorphosis. The cocoon rips, the armor cracks, and from that destruction the man begins to emerge, not polished, not perfect, but whole. Slowly he begins to reclaim the feminine within. He stops projecting his anima onto women who cannot carry her weight. He stops seeking his soul in another's body. He begins the quiet, terrifying, and beautiful work of inner union. It is in this stage, not the chasing, not the clinging, where real masculinity is born. Not bravado, not domination, but grounded presence, conscious strength, the ability to feel deeply without being consumed, the ability to desire without control, the ability to walk away, not with bitterness, but with clarity. You may recognize this transformation in someone you've known, or perhaps you are living it yourself. Perhaps you've been the woman he clung to, wondering why he wouldn't let go even as he sabotaged every tender moment. Or perhaps you've been the one who loved a man bound to his illusions, watching him chase a storm while you stood in the stillness, waiting. If you are the woman he returns to after the storm, do not make yourself smaller to hold him. Do not compete with her ghost. Do not become his reward for surviving his own shadows. You are not a consolation. You are a sovereign being. And he must meet you not as a fragmented man, but as one who has walked through the fire and returned whole. And if you are the man tangled in the wrong love, hear this. The ache you feel is not for her. It is for the part of you she awoke and left starving. Feed it yourself. Rescue the inner child who learned that love is pain. Integrate the shadow. Heal the mother wound. Reclaim your anima. Only then will you be free. Only then can you love, truly love, without needing to possess or be possessed. There is a dangerous comfort in the chaos of an unhealed connection. It offers a kind of false aliveness, the adrenaline of conflict, the seduction of emotional whiplash, the tragic intimacy of trauma bonding. For the man who cannot let go, this relationship becomes less about connection and more about identity. She is no longer just a woman. She is the stage upon which his most ancient battles are played out. Battles between ego and essence, fear and freedom, illusion and truth. But this is not love. This is possession by the unconscious. Every time he returns to her, despite knowing she is wrong for him, he is returning not to love, but to a psychic loop, an unresolved archetypal script written long before she appeared. He is not captivated by her, but by the unresolved within himself that she awakens. She activates the unfinished story, and unfinished stories will always demand a return, not for closure, but for reckoning. In the realm of Jungian psychology, this woman is often the anima possessor, not because she chooses to hold that power, but because he has projected onto her the entirety of his internal feminine. She is no longer a person in his eyes, but the vessel of his longing, his wounding, his sacred feminine denied. And so he chases her, not because he is in love, but because he has exiled half of his soul, and she carries its echo. This projection distorts reality. He sees in her not her actual qualities, but a reflection of what he has lost or never known. He loves her madness because it mirrors his own unacknowledged chaos. He clings to her coldness because it confirms the emotional abandonment etched into him as a child. He mistakes the tension for fate, the fear for passion, the hurt for meaning, and still, he cannot leave, until he realizes that the attachment is not to the woman, but to the pain that she revives, that her wrongness is precisely what makes the wound feel familiar, and because it is familiar, it feels like home. This is the betrayal of the psyche. It does not crave what is healthy, it craves what it knows. That is the tragedy, and the opportunity. The man must ask the question that breaks illusions. What does she represent in me that I have abandoned? Is it vulnerability? Creativity? The need to be mothered? The desire to be seen in his raw, unguarded truth? The woman he cannot let go of is a psychic stand-in for those forsaken parts. She is both a symptom and a messenger, and unless he integrates what she represents, he will remain bound. Not to her, but to his own fragmentation. Sometimes she leaves first, and when she does, he may feel devastated, lost, emptied. Not because he has lost her, but because he has lost the mirror. Without her, he is alone with his shadow. No more distractions, no more chaos to blame. Just the silence of the self, asking to be met. And it is in this silence that the true journey begins. There is a dangerous comfort in the chaos of an unhealed connection. It offers a kind of false aliveness, the adrenaline of conflict, the seduction of emotional whiplash, the tragic intimacy of trauma bonding. For the man who cannot let go, this relationship becomes less about connection and more about identity. She is no longer just a woman. She is the stage upon which his most ancient battles are played out, battles between ego and essence, fear and freedom, illusion and truth. But this is not love. This is possession by the unconscious. It is not enough to sever the bond physically. The psychic entanglement must be unraveled, the anima must be reclaimed. He must find within himself the very things he sought in her: emotional truth, mystery, wildness, intuition, tenderness. These are not qualities she owns. They are parts of his own soul that he has disowned. To integrate them is to become whole. This is the crucible of individuation, and it is brutal, because it requires that he give up the fantasy of rescue, that he let go of the belief that love will fix what only self-awareness can heal, that he stop making women into mirrors for his forgotten soul, and instead become the mirror himself. And then something shifts. He stops seeing women as saviors or threats. He stops needing chaos to feel alive. He begins to relate, not from his wounds, but from his center. Love no longer feels like a battlefield. It feels like truth, still imperfect, still human, but free. And for the woman caught in this drama, there is a lesson too. You are not responsible for the healing he refuses to do. You are not his archetype, his mother, his muse, or his battleground. You are not obligated to carry his unlived soul like a weight in your chest. You are allowed to put it down, to walk away, to choose peace over potential. In the end, it is not about blame, it is about awakening. If he awakens, he may one day thank her, not because she loved him perfectly, but because her imperfection shattered the illusion he mistook for love, because through the pain, he came back to himself. And that is the paradox. Sometimes, the wrong person is the one who breaks you open just enough to find the truth, not the truth of them, but the truth of you. Some men never return from this kind of love. They live as haunted beings, moving from woman to woman with ghosted eyes, still tethered to the psychic imprint of the one who awakened their inner death. Because when a man loves the wrong woman deeply, when he cannot let her go, it's not just because she touched his heart, it's because she pierced his identity. She reached into his unconscious and held his shadow in her hands. And when she left, or when he finally walked away, she took a part of him with her. Or so he believes. But no one can steal what you've never fully owned. She did not take his soul. She exposed it. And now, without her to project onto, he is left naked, disoriented, raw, and terrified of the emptiness he used to fill with her chaos. This is the moment where many falter. They return to her not out of love, but out of fear. Not because she is right, but because the silence she leaves behind screams too loud. This silence is sacred. It is the crucible, the place where false selves die and truth is born. But most men have never been taught to withstand this kind of silence. They were taught to fight or flee, to perform or possess. Vulnerability was weakness. Grief was forbidden. Stillness was unbearable. And so they run into new distractions, new lovers, new performances of power, anything to avoid the mirror she shattered and left behind. But the man who dares to stay, to sit in the ruins, to breathe with the ache, he is the one who awakens. In that space of devastation, the unconscious rises like a tide. Memories surface, not just of her, but of every time he abandoned himself to be loved, every moment he sacrificed truth for approval, every time he betrayed his soul to feel chosen. She did not create these wounds. She simply became the last woman willing to show him that they were still bleeding. This is the turning point. He begins to see that the relationship was not a curse, it was a summons, an invitation to die to the version of himself built on projection, fantasy, and inherited roles. And in that death, the real man, the whole man, begins to emerge. It is not dramatic, it is not grand, it is quiet, humble, internal. He starts listening, to his body, to his breath, to the feelings he used to drown in distraction. He starts to understand the language of his own soul. The ache becomes a teacher. The silence becomes scripture. He stops running, and for the first time in his life, he begins to feel what real love might actually be. Not obsession, not fear, not conquest, but presence. And that presence begins within. He learns to be with himself the way he used to beg her to be with him, patient, curious, unafraid of depth.
He no longer needs to control a woman to feel powerful, nor chase one to feel alive. This is individuation, not perfection, but wholeness, not becoming someone else, but becoming yourself. And something extraordinary happens when a man reaches this stage. He begins to attract differently. He no longer pulls in women who reflect his wounds. He draws in women who mirror his integration. He sees clearly now. She was never the one. She was the wake-up call. And now that he's awake, he is free. But what of the woman he couldn't let go? She may be long gone. Or perhaps she too has changed. Perhaps she was on her own path of awakening, her own journey through the dark. Sometimes the same fire that burns us down also forges a new kind of intimacy. Not the enmeshment of trauma, but the resonance of two sovereign souls who have met themselves. And sometimes she was only meant to be the fire. To the women who have been the wrong one, hear this. You were never small. You were never powerless. You were never just a lesson. You were a mirror, a threshold, a necessary storm. Your love, even if it broke him, was part of a deeper alchemy. Do not carry guilt for being the flame that forced him to see. It is not your burden to fix him. It was your offering to awaken him. And to the men still holding on to what hurts, let go not of her, but of the version of you that believes you need her to be whole. Because when you let go of what is not true, you make room for what is. And the love that will meet you there, whether from within or without, will not demand your pain as proof. It will not feed on your fear. It will not echo your wounding. It will rise from your wholeness, and it will feel like peace. There comes a moment, rare, sacred, and unmistakable, when the grip finally loosens. Not because she changed, not because he found someone new, but because the man has faced the one thing he feared more than losing her: himself. And in that stillness he sees her, clearly, maybe for the first time. Not as the fantasy he clung to, not as the villain he once blamed, but as a woman. A human being with her own wounds, her own longings, her own unconscious tides. The veil lifts. The illusion dissolves. And what's left is not obsession, but understanding. The karmic wheel slows. The same woman who once intoxicated him now feels strangely distant, not in bitterness, but in release. What was once magnetic is now neutral. What once consumed him now feels complete. The chain is broken, not because he forgot her, but because he remembered himself. It is here, in this inner clarity, where real power begins. A power that doesn't need to dominate, prove, or pursue. A power rooted in presence, in discernment, in quiet knowing. The man is no longer a seeker of chaos, no longer addicted to the ache that once defined his desire. He has touched the bottom of his own soul and made peace with its shadows. And that peace radiates. He no longer confuses drama with depth. He no longer mistakes longing for love. He understands now that some connections are sacred not because they last, but because they burn everything false to the ground. The woman he once called his downfall becomes, in truth, the flame that stripped him of ego, illusion, and all the stories that no longer served his becoming. This isn't the kind of ending you read in romance novels. There's no dramatic reconciliation, no explosive reunion. There is only evolution, a quiet departure from pain, a calm reclamation of self. And for the first time, he does not feel empty without her. He feels full of himself, of life, of a love that no longer hinges on being needed, chosen, or saved. He understands now, the woman he couldn't let go wasn't a mistake. She was a mirror. And mirrors are meant to be looked into, not clutched. He sees now the difference between entanglement and intimacy, between craving and connection, between fantasy and truth. And perhaps, somewhere in the future, he meets a woman, not a savior, not a ghost from the past, but a partner, a sovereign being who does not echo his wounds, but resonates with his wholeness. With her, there is no need to perform or prove. There is only space, presence, the quiet stability of love without drama, the thrilling depth of connection without pain. And he is ready for her, not because he healed for her, but because he became whole without her. She does not replace the woman he couldn't let go. She arrives because he finally let go, not just of her, but of the self who needed to be broken to feel alive. The boy has died. The man has emerged. To the women listening, if you have ever been the one he couldn't forget, know that your impact was never in vain. Whether you were storm or sanctuary, you awakened something in him that silence could not. But you are not responsible for whether he learns from it or repeats it. Your worth is not tied to his growth. And if you are the one who cannot let go of him, the man who was never fully yours, who touched you in places you didn't know existed, who disappeared and returned like a ghost of possibility, ask yourself, what part of you still waits to be chosen? Because no one can hold you the way your own soul can. No man's love, no matter how intense, can substitute the love you withhold from yourself. And the moment you choose to let go, not of him, but of the illusion of what could have been, you will be free. Not just from him, but from the version of you that accepted crumbs in the name of connection. Letting go is not a loss, it is a liberation. It is the soul's quiet way of saying, I'm ready for more. You do not need to be the one he can't forget. Be the one who remembers herself. Be the one who breaks the cycle, not with fire, but with grace. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.